She had $4 billion in the bank and the best health money could buy. But tonight, she was prepared to destroy a man's life over a $10 toy. Tina Irwin's diamond earrings caught the candlelight as she rose from her corner table, her emerald silk dress whispering against the polished floor of the Charles restaurant. Her manicured finger trembled, not with age but with rage, as she pointed at the small, chipped music box cradled in a little girl's hands. "Where did you get that?" Her voice cut through the hushed Christmas Eve atmosphere like a blade through silk. The restaurant fell silent. Waiters froze mid-step. Crystal glasses stopped clinking. Even the pianist's fingers hesitated on the ivory keys. Because when Tina Irwin spoke, the world listened, or paid the price. The Charles restaurant existed in a bubble of old money and older traditions. Beneath chandeliers that had witnessed a century of celebrations, its patrons dined on plates worth more than most people's monthly rent. The air smelled of truffle oil, aged wine, and particular silence that only extraordinary wealth can buy. Tina Irwin had claimed the corner table 37 years ago, the night her late husband first brought her here to celebrate their logistics company's first $1 million contract. Now, at 72, she sat alone at that same table every Christmas Eve, a ritual as unchanging as the imported linen tablecloth and the single red rose in its crystal vase. She was magnificent in the way ancient cathedrals are magnificent, imposing, cold, and utterly untouchable. Her silver hair was swept into an elegant chignon, each strand precisely placed. Her emerald dress, custom-tailored in Milan, cost more than a luxury sedan. But her eyes, sharp and calculating behind her designer frames, held the same expression they'd held for the past decade. The look of a woman who had won every battle except the one that mattered. The lobster on her plate cost $1,000. It tasted like ash. She had built an empire. $4 billion in logistics and technology, 73 patents, 500 employees, 3 corporate headquarters across 2 continents. She had everything a person could want, except the one thing money couldn't buy, her son's forgiveness. 10 years ago, she had watched him walk through those brass-framed doors for the last time. He had chosen a dusty music box, a worthless relic, she called it, over a multi-million-dollar inheritance. She had told him never to return, and she, Tina Irwin, always kept her word. The wound still felt fresh, even after a decade. She took a sip of her $500 bottle of wine and tasted only regret. Then the door opened. A gust of December wind carried in snow, and something else. Something that didn't belong in the Charles. A man in a canvas work jacket, wore at the elbows, snowflakes melting on his shoulders. His boots left wet prints on the pristine marble floor. He held the hand of a little girl in a red coat that had been patched at the sleeve. The hostess looked mortified. "Sir, I'm afraid." "Reservation for Jones," the man said quietly, with a dignity that transcended his threadbare clothes. "2 for dinner." Tina watched with vague interest as the hostess checked her tablet, her expression shifting from disdain to professional courtesy. Someone had made a reservation. Someone had paid in advance. The Charles had no choice but to honor it, no matter how out of place these two looked. As they walked past her table, Tina's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. The little girl, she couldn't have been more than 7, clutched something against her chest, something small and wooden and unmistakable. A hand-carved music box with a tiny brass key dangling from its side. The same music box Tina's son had taken when he left. The same box that had belonged to his grandmother, then his father, then him. The same box that had cost her everything. Tina's heart, That cold, efficient muscle stuttered in her chest. It couldn't be. That box was supposed to be in a landfill somewhere, or pawned for drug money, or rotting in whatever gutter her son had ended up in. She'd spent years telling herself that story, building a narrative where she was right and he was wrong. But there it was, chipped paint and all, catching the candlelight just as it had 1,000 times before in her son's hands. Her chair scraped against the floor as she stood, her lobster forgotten. Someone had taken what belonged to her family. Someone had stolen her last connection to the son she'd disowned. And Tina Irwin, the steel queen of American logistics, was about to make them pay. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. It reminds us that hope and second chances are universal languages. Tina crossed the distance between tables in 4 measured steps. Her heels clicked against marble like a judge's gavel. Andy Jones looked up from helping his daughter into her seat, his hazel eyes meeting Tina's cold stare. He was younger than she expected, mid-30s, perhaps, with the callous hands of craftsman and the tired eyes of someone who'd fought too many battles lately. "That music box," Tina said, her voice low and dangerous. "Where did you get it?" The little girl, Amanda, Tina heard Andy call her, looked up with wide eyes, clutching the box tighter. Up close, Tina could see the details. The hand-carved roses on the lid, the tiny brass hinges, the hairline crack along one edge that her late husband had made when he dropped it on their anniversary. "I'm sorry." Andy's voice was polite but cautious, the tone of a man who'd learned not to trust wealthy strangers. "That box belongs to my family." Tina's finger pointed like a prosecutor's accusation. "It was stolen from my son 10 years ago. So I'll ask you again, where did you get it?" Around them, the restaurant had gone silent. Tina was dimly aware of her fellow diners watching, of the waiters hovering uncertainly, of the manager beginning to move toward them. Andy's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, with all due respect, nothing was stolen. I bought this box from a pawn shop 6 months ago." A pawn shop. Tina's laugh was bitter as winter wind. "Of course. And I'm sure you have a receipt." "Actually," Andy reached into his jacket pocket, his movement slow and deliberate, "I do." He handed her a crumpled piece of paper. Tina's hand shook as she read it. Not because she was wrong, but because she was partly right. Moretti's Pawn, downtown. 6 months ago. Sale price, $10. $10. Her family's heirloom. The one thing her son had valued more than millions, had been worth $10 to someone. "Daddy," Amanda's small voice cut through Tina's fury like a key turning in a lock. "Why is the pretty lady angry?" Andy knelt beside his daughter, his large hands gentle on her small shoulders. "It's okay, sweetheart. The lady thinks the music box used to belong to someone she knew." "It did belong to someone I knew," Tina snapped. "My son, before someone sold it to pay for medical bills," Andy interrupted, standing to his full height. He wasn't as tall as Tina in her heels, but his presence suddenly seemed to fill the space between them. "I did my research before I bought it, ma'am. I wanted to know its story." Tina's breath caught. "Medical bills?" The pawn shop owner keeps records. He remembered the transaction. A young man, mid-20s, came in desperate, said he needed money to help a neighbor whose kid was sick, leukemia. Andy's eyes flicked to Amanda, and something in his expression made Tina's chest tighten. "The neighbor's kid was me. I was 12. My dad couldn't afford the treatments." The restaurant tilted. Tina reached for the back of Amanda's chair to steady herself. "That's..." She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't reconcile the narrative she'd built. Her son as a reckless fool throwing away his future. With this new information, Amanda tugged on her father's sleeve. "Can I show her, Daddy?" "Show me what?" Tina heard herself ask. The little girl held up the music box with both hands, offering it like a sacred object. It was broken when Daddy found it. The gears didn't work. But Daddy fixed it. He worked on it every night for 3 months. He's really good at fixing things. Andy's cheeks colored slightly. "I'm a woodworker." Anyway, the box's mechanism was corroded. The veneer was cracked. The music cylinder was jammed. I spent every evening in my workshop putting it back together. Tina stared at the box in Amanda's hands. Now that she looked closer, she could see the truth of Andy's words. The veneer had been expertly restored. The brass key gleamed with fresh polish. Even the crack her husband had made had been sealed with such skill that you'd never know it was there unless you'd memorized every millimeter of the box as Tina had. Why? The word escaped before Tina could stop it. Why spend months restoring a $10 pawn shop find? Andy's smile was sad. Because my daughter deserved a piece of magic. Because her mother died 2 years ago, and I can't afford the kind of Christmas presents other kids get. But I can give her something beautiful that I made with my own hands. Something with a story. Amanda set the music box on the table and reached into her coat pocket. When her small hand emerged, she was holding something else. A tiny wooden bird, no bigger than her thumb, carved with such delicate detail that Tina could see individual feathers. The girl walked around the table and held it up to Tina. "Daddy makes these," Amanda said softly. "He says birds remember how to fly even when they forget they have wings." "You look like you forgot how to fly, ma'am. Maybe you need to remember." Tina took the bird with numb fingers. The wood was warm from Amanda's pocket, smooth as silk, carved with a precision that spoke of hundreds of hours of practice. It was the kind of craftsmanship her late husband would have appreciated, the kind he'd tried to teach their son before the boy had decided he wanted to work with his hands instead of his inheritance. Tina's voice cracked. "I can't accept this." "It's okay," Amanda said with the easy generosity of children. "Daddy says the best gifts are the ones you give when people are sad. And you look really, really sad." The restaurant had started breathing again, conversations resuming in hushed tones. The manager had retreated, but Tina stood frozen, a $4 billion tech magnate, undone by a 7-year-old's kindness. She looked down at the music box on the table, at Andy's careful restoration, at the receipt from the pawn shop, at the timeline that didn't match her carefully constructed narrative of her son's fall from grace. "I need to know something," she said finally. "The man who sold this box. Did the pawn shop owner remember anything else about him?" Andy hesitated, exchanging a glance with Amanda. He said the guy seemed decent. Desperate, but decent. He apologized for selling it. Said it was a family heirloom, but someone's life was worth more than an object. The owner said he'd never seen someone cry over pawning something before. Tina's eyes burned. She blinked rapidly, refusing to let tears fall in public. Not here. Not after 10 years of perfect control. "Ma'am," Andy said quietly, "I don't know who your son is or what happened between you, but that box, it's in better condition now than it probably was when he owned it. I've treated it like the treasure it is. And Amanda," he put his hand on his daughter's shoulder, "she wins it every night before bed. It plays Claire de Lune. She says it sounds like her mom singing." Tina looked at the little girl in the red coat, at her father in his threadbare jacket. at the music box that had somehow survived her son's exile and found its way to people who valued it more than she ever had. She thought about her corner table, her $1,000 lobster, her empty penthouse waiting in the darkness. She thought about her son's last words to her. "You taught me the price of everything, Mom, but you never taught me the value of anything." For 10 years, she'd told herself she was right, that he'd been the fool, that he'd thrown away everything that mattered for a worthless piece of wood and brass. But standing here now, watching Amanda cradle the box like it held the secrets of the universe, watching Andy's protective hand on his daughter's shoulder, Tina wondered if perhaps she'd been the fool all along. "Keep it," she heard herself say. The words felt like pulling nails from her chest. "The box. Keep it." Andy's eyes widened. "Ma'am, if it's your family's heirloom, it belongs to people who understand its value now." Tina's voice was steady, even as her world tilted. "You've given it a new life, a better life than it would have had in my son's possession. Or mine." She turned to leave, then stopped. "The pawn shop. Moretti's, you said?" "Yes, ma'am. Downtown on 5th and Marshall." Tina nodded once, then walked back to her table with as much dignity as she could muster. She didn't sit. Instead, she pulled out her phone and made a call she should have made a decade ago. "Richard, it's Tina Irwin. I need you to pull every transaction record from Moretti's pawn shop for the past 10 years. Yes, all of them. And Richard, I need it tonight." She ended the call and finally allowed herself to look back at Andy and Amanda. They had settled into their seats, the music box between them on the table, the little girl chattering excitedly about the menu. The manager approached Tina's table. "Mrs. Irwin, I apologize for the disturbance. Shall I have them moved to another section?" "No." Tina's voice was sharp. "But transfer their bill to my account, whatever they order, and bring me their server. I want to ensure they get the best service this restaurant can provide." The manager blinked in surprise, but nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Irwin." Tina sat down at her corner table, the wooden bird still clutched in her palm. She didn't eat. She couldn't. Instead, she watched Andy and Amanda across the restaurant, watched the way he patiently explained the menu to her, watched the way she laughed at something he said, watched the way they existed in a bubble of love that all her billions had never been able to buy. And for the first time in 10 years, Tina Irwin, the Steel Queen, the woman who never looked back, allowed herself to wonder if it wasn't too late to learn how to fly again. Owing the weight of the music box, her excitement uncontainable. "Mr. Jones," Tina said, and Andy looked up in surprise. "I owe you an apology. I made assumptions about you that were unfair." Tina's phone buzzed 20 minutes later. Richard, her head of security and investigations, worked fast. It was why she paid him a small fortune. She read the text message 3 times, each word landing like a hammer blow. "Transaction confirmed. Music box pawned by Michael Irwin 10 years ago. Proceeds, $850. Full amount traced to St. Mary's Hospital. Payment for Jonathan Jones, age 12, leukemia treatment. Your son paid for 3 months of chemotherapy. Kid survived. Dad died 2 years later, workplace accident. Son inherited woodworking business." Michael. Her son's name felt foreign in her mind, like a word in a language she'd once spoken but had forgotten. She'd spent a decade not saying it, not thinking it, building walls so high that Eva's memory couldn't climb them. And now she learned he'd use her family's heirloom to save a child's life, that the child had grown up to become a man, sitting across the restaurant with his own daughter, that her son's last act of defiance hadn't been selfishness but sacrifice. The lobster on her plate had gone cold. Tina pushed it away and stood, her decision made with the same swift certainty that had built her empire. She crossed Andy's table just as her appetizers arrived. Simple pasta dishes that her restaurant charged $85 for. Amanda was shan frankly beneath me. Andy set down his fork. "Ma'am, you don't." "Please." Tina held up her hand. "Let me finish. I'd like to know more about your work, your woodworking. Do you have a card?" Andy reached into his wallet and pulled out a worn business card. Jones Custom Woodwork, it read, with an address in the industrial district and a phone number. The card itself was a work of art, thick stock with subtle wood grain pattern embossed into it. "I don't get many clients anymore," Andy admitted. "The building owner sold to a developer 6 months ago. We're all being evicted after New Year's. I've been trying to finish orders and find a new space, but..." He glanced at Amanda. "Rent in this city isn't kind to small businesses." Tina studied the card, her mind already calculating possibilities. "What kind of work do you do?" "Custom furniture, mostly. Restoration work. Some sculptural pieces." Andy's eyes lit up despite his obvious exhaustion. "I apprenticed under my father from the time I could hold a chisel. He taught me that good woodwork isn't just about making something functional. It's about honoring the tree that died to give you the material. Every piece tells a story. Like the music box," Tina said softly. "Especially like the music box." Andy smiled at Amanda. "When I found it in that pawn shop, I could see what it had been, what it could be again. The mechanism was corroded but not broken. The veneer was damaged but not destroyed. It just needed someone willing to put in the time to bring it back." "Why 3 months?" Tina asked abruptly. "You said you worked on it every evening for 3 months." Andy's expression grew distant. "Because that's how long my daughter has been asking when we can go back to the house we used to live in, when Mommy was still here, when things were..." He stopped, clearing his throat. "I wanted to give her something that took time, something that showed her that broken things can be made beautiful again if you're patient enough." Amanda looked up from her pasta. "Daddy says grief is like a broken music box. The song is still inside. You just have to fix the parts that let it play again." Tina's hand went to her chest, right over her heart. This child, this impossible, wise little child, had just articulated something Tina had spent 10 years refusing to understand. "Your father is a very smart man," she managed. "The smartest," Amanda agreed loyally. Tina looked down at the business card in her hand. She thought about her son selling this box to save a stranger's child. She thought about that child growing up to restore the box for his own daughter. She thought about the threads of connection that bound people together in ways money could never untangle. "Mr. Jones," she said, "I'd like to visit your workshop. Tomorrow, if possible." Andy blinked. "Tomorrow is Christmas Day." "I'm aware. I have nowhere else to be, and something tells me this can't wait until after the holidays." Tina's voice softened. "Please, I'd like to understand the kind of work that goes into restoration, the kind of patience it takes to bring broken things back to life." Andy exchanged a glance with Amanda, who nodded enthusiastically. "Okay," he said finally. 10 o'clock? The address is on the card. 10 o'clock, Tina confirmed. She started to leave, then turned back. "Mr. Jones, thank you for saving the box and for showing it the respect it deserved." "It's Andy," he said with a slight smile. "And you're welcome, Mrs. Owen." Tina Irwin. She watched his face carefully for recognition, but saw none. Good. He didn't know who she was. didn't know her empire or her reputation. For once, she could be judged on her actions rather than her bank account. As she walked back to her table, Tina felt something shift inside her chest. The walls she'd built were beginning to crack, and instead of terror, she felt something dangerously close to hope. Tina sat at her corner table and stared at her phone for a long time. Richard had sent her additional information. Andy's full name, his business history, his late wife's obituary, Amanda's birth date. Everything laid out in the cold, clinical detail that Tina usually appreciated. But there was one piece of information that made her hands shake. A note at the bottom of Richard's report. Jonathan Andy Jones was pen pals with Michael Irwin for 5 years after his treatment. Letters stopped 10 years ago. Same time as the music box transaction. Last known communication. Michael writing to inform Andy of his father's death and his inheritance of the workshop. Her son had known Andy, had corresponded with him, had watched the boy he'd saved grow into a man, and then had given him the tools to build a life through his father's workshop. And Tina had known none of it. She opened her phone's contact list and scrolled to a number she hadn't dialed in a decade. Michael's number, likely disconnected years ago. Her finger hovered over the call button. She couldn't do it. Not yet. Not until she understood what she was apologizing for. Not until she could face the magnitude of her own blindness. Instead, she opened her email and typed a message to her assistant. Clear my schedule for the next week. All meetings, all calls, everything. I'm taking personal time. No interruptions unless the company is literally on fire. She hit send and felt the weight of the decision settle on her shoulders like a physical thing. Across the restaurant, Andy was helping Amanda into her coat. They stopped at the hostess stand, and Tina watched as Andy tried to pay for their meal, only to be told it had already been taken care of. His expression shifted from confusion to understanding as he looked back at Tina's table. He raised his hand in a small wave. Amanda copied him, her smile bright enough to light the entire restaurant. Tina waved back, and for the first time in 10 years, her smile didn't feel like a weapon. The drive home took 20 minutes. Tina's penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of the Fitzgerald building, with views that stretched across the entire city. It was worth more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes. It had never felt emptier. She set her purse on the marble entryway table and walked through rooms that could have been featured in architectural magazines. Everything was perfect. Everything was cold. Everything was exactly as she designed it. A monument to success with no soul. In her office, she pulled up the files Richard had sent. Andy's workshop was in the old industrial district, a building scheduled for demolition in 3 weeks to make way for luxury condos. The developer was, Tina's breath caught, Marcus Reeves, her former business rival. The same man who'd tried to buy out her company 15 years ago and had settled for slow, petty revenge ever since. She should have known. Marcus had a talent for finding vulnerable people and crushing them, but not this time. Tina pulled up her contacts and made 3 phone calls. The first to her real estate attorney, the second to her acquisitions team, the third to Marcus Reeves himself. Marcus, darling, she said when he answered, her voice honey over steel. I hear you've been buying up the Riverside Industrial Complex. I'd like to make you an offer you can't refuse. 20 minutes later, she owned the building. Marcus had tried to play hardball, but Tina had been playing this game since before he was born. She'd offered him 3 times what he'd paid, with the stipulation that all current tenants would have leases extended at their current rates for the next 10 years. Marcus had sputtered about lost profits, But when Tina casually mentioned that she'd been looking into certain questionable practices in his development projects, he'd taken the deal. She hung up and stared at the wooden bird Amanda had given her, sitting on her desk like a tiny prophet. "Okay," she whispered to it. "Okay, I'm trying to remember how to fly." Outside her window, the city glittered with Christmas lights. Somewhere out there, her son was alive. Somewhere out there, she had a chance to undo 10 years of mistakes. Tomorrow, she would start at a woodworker's shop in the industrial district. Tomorrow, she would begin to learn the value of things that couldn't be bought. Listen, if you've made it this far in the story, you're invested. You want to know what happens next. But here's the thing. Most people scroll past these stories without subscribing. They watch, they enjoy, and they disappear. If this story matters to you, if you actually care how it ends, hit that subscribe button, please. It takes 2 seconds. And if you don't, you'll probably forget about this channel and never hear any other amazing stories from me. The Riverside Industrial Building looked like it was held together by hope and old paint. Tina's driver had been horrified when she'd given him the address, but she'd overridden his concerns with the same tone that had built her empire. Now, standing in front of the weathered brick facade at precisely 10 o'clock on Christmas morning, she understood his hesitation. This wasn't the world she usually inhabited. There were no doormen, no marble lobbies, no security desks. Just a heavy door with a faded Jones Custom Woodwork sign and the sound of laughter coming from inside. She knocked. Andy opened the door in a flannel shirt and jeans, sawdust in his hair, and a smile on his face. "Mrs. Irwin, Merry Christmas. Come in, please." The workshop was a cathedral of wood and light. Every surface was covered with projects in various stages of completion. Chairs with delicate spindle work, tables with inlaid patterns, small boxes carved with impossible detail. Sawdust danced in the morning sun streaming through high windows, and the smell of pine and cedar filled the air like incense. Amanda was in the corner, wearing safety goggles too big for her face, sanding a small piece of wood under Andy's workbench. "We're painting stars," she announced. "Daddy says every workshop needs more stars." Tina found herself smiling. Every workshop does. Andy led Tina to his main workbench, where the music box sat like a shrine. In the morning light, she could see the full extent of his restoration work. Every detail had been lovingly preserved or repaired. It was more beautiful now than she remembered. "I wanted to show you something," Andy said, his voice careful. "When I was restoring it, I found something I don't think was meant to be found. Not by me, anyway." He turned the box over and pressed on a specific point on the base. A small panel slid open, revealing a hidden compartment Tina had never known existed. Inside were letters, her son's handwriting. Tina's knees went weak. Andy quickly pulled over a stool, and she sat heavily, staring at the letters like they might bite her. "I didn't read them," Andy said quietly. "They're not addressed to me, but I think they might be for you." With trembling hands, Tina reached the first letter. It was dated 10 years ago, the paper yellowed with age. "Mom," it began, and she had to stop, press her hand to her mouth, breathe through the grief that slammed into her chest. She read, "Mom, I'm writing this knowing you'll probably never read it. You told me never to contact you again, and I'm respecting that. But I needed to write these words anyway, even if they stay hidden in the box forever. You asked me how I could choose an old music box over millions of dollars, over the company, over our family name. And I tried to explain, but I don't think I did it very well. So let me try again. The box isn't valuable because it's old or because Grandma owned it. It's valuable because every time Dad wounded up, he'd close his eyes and smile. Remember? He'd say that Claire de Lune reminded him of the night he proposed to you, when you both danced in the rain outside that restaurant. You taught me to build an empire. Mom, you taught me about profit margins and market share and strategic positioning. But Dad taught me about the things that make empires worth building. He taught me that some treasures can't be measured in dollars. I'm not throwing away my future. I'm choosing a different one. One where I work with my hands and come home tired and satisfied instead of rich and hollow. One where I can help people like Andy's family, who need a miracle more than they need another corporation squeezing them dry. I hope someday you'll understand. And if you don't, I hope you'll at least know that I love you, that I always will, that this wasn't about rebellion or rejection. It was about finding my own way to matter. Your son, Michael. Tina couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She reached for the second letter with shaking hands. Mom, it's been 3 years. Andy's father died today. Workplace accident at the construction site, where he was working 3 jobs to pay off the last of the medical bills. The same bills I helped with. I gave Andy the music box. Not get rid of it, but because he needs it more than I do right now. He needs to know that broken things can be fixed. That darkness doesn't last forever. That there's still music in the world, even when it feels silent. I'm starting a foundation. Nothing big. Nothing with our family name on it. Just a quiet fund to help people like Andy's family. People who fall through the cracks because they're too proud to ask for help and too poor to survive without it. I'm using the skills you taught me, Mom. Business structure, financial planning, strategic giving. You'd actually be proud of how efficient I've made it. I wish I could tell you about it. I wish I could hear you say you understand. But I understand if you can't. Still your son, Michael. There were 6 more letters. Each one a glimpse into a life Tina had never known her son was living. Each one showing a man who'd taken the values she'd taught him and transformed them into something beautiful. The last letter was dated 5 years ago. Mom, this will probably be my last letter. Not because I've stopped caring, but because I think I've finally accepted that you've moved on, that you built a life that doesn't include me, and that's okay. I'm happy. That's the strange thing. I'm happy in ways I never would have been if I'd stayed in the corporate world. I wake up every morning knowing that my work matters to someone, that the chair I built will hold a family's dinners for generations, that the box I restore will carry someone's memories. I hope you're happy too, Mom. I hope your empire keeps growing. I hope you find whatever you're looking for in those boardrooms and profit reports. And if someday you wake up and realize you're looking for something else, something softer, something real, I hope you remember that it's never too late to choose differently. The music box will always have room for one more letter, one more chance. Forever your son, Michael. Tina folded the last letter with careful precision, her tears falling onto the worn paper. She looked up at Andy through blurred vision. Where is he? Her voice broke. Where's my son? Andy's face filled with compassion and something that looked like sorrow. He knelt beside her stool, bringing himself to her eye level. Mrs. Irwin, he said gently, Michael died 4 years ago. The workshop tilted. Tina gripped the edge of the workbench, her knuckles white. No. The word was barely a whisper. No, that's not. I'm so sorry. Andy's voice was steady, his eyes kind but unflinching. It was sudden, a car accident. He was coming back from helping a family move out of a condemned building. He didn't suffer. Why didn't anyone tell me? Tina's voice rose. Why wasn't I notified? I'm his mother. I had a right. You disowned him, Andy said, not unkindly. He'd changed his emergency contacts years before. His will left everything to his foundation. There was a small obituary, but... He paused. I don't think anyone knew how to reach you, or if they should. Tina pressed her hands to her face. 10 years. She'd had 10 years to reach out, to break her own stubborn pride, to tell her son she'd been wrong. And she'd spent every single one of those years building walls instead of bridges. I was so sure I was right, she whispered through her fingers. I was so sure he was throwing his life away. He wasn't. Andy stood, walked to a filing cabinet, and pulled out a folder. After Michael died, I inherited his foundation, along with his letters to me over the years. I've been trying to continue his work. He handed her the folder. This is what he built. Tina opened it with trembling hands. Inside were financial statements, thank you letters, photographs of families, dozens of them, hundreds maybe, all helped by her son's foundation. Medical bills paid, educations funded, businesses saved from bankruptcy. An empire of kindness built one silent act at a time. He helped over 300 families in 10 years. Andy said quietly, he used every skill you taught him about business and money and strategy. He just used them differently. He built something that mattered, Mrs. Irwin. And he did it all without ever using your family name, because he didn't want you to feel obligated. He wanted to do it on his own terms. Amanda appeared at Tina's side, holding out a tissue. It's okay to cry, she said with the wisdom of a child who knew grief intimately. Daddy says tears are just love that has nowhere else to go. Tina took the tissue and pulled Amanda into a hug before she realized what she was doing. The little girl smelled like crayons and sawdust and innocence, and she wrapped her small arms around Tina's neck without hesitation. I waited too long, Tina sobbed into Amanda's red coat. I was supposed to have more time. You have time now, Amanda said simply. You can still tell his story. Daddy says that's what we do for people we love who aren't here anymore. We tell their stories, so they're never really gone. Tina spent the next 3 hours in Andy's workshop, reading through every file Michael had kept, every thank you note, every success story, every life her son had touched while she'd been building her empire of steel and silicon. She learned that her son had been brilliant at fundraising without ever revealing his own last name. He'd built networks of small donors, created sustainable programs, and helped hundreds of people find their footing when the world had knocked them down. He'd been everything she'd raised him to be. He just hadn't been what she'd wanted him to be. The foundation is struggling now, Andy admitted, watching her read. Michael was the heart of it. I've tried to keep it going, but I'm not a businessman. I'm a woodworker. I can balance my own books, but this... He gestured at the folders. This needs someone who understands high-level finance and strategy. Tina looked up, her mind already racing through possibilities. How much does it need? Money isn't the main problem, Andy said. Michael had it set up with a decent endowment. It's the infrastructure, the organization, the connections to find people who need help and vet them properly, the follow-through to make sure the help actually works. That's what I do, Tina said slowly. Logistics, organization, efficient distribution of resources. Andy tilted his head. I'm sorry, I don't think I ever asked, what is it you do, Mrs. Irwin? For the first time in her life, Tina felt embarrassed by her success. I run a logistics and technology company. A large one. How large? For $1 billion in annual revenue. Andy's eyes widened. Oh. He sat down heavily on a work stool. You're that Tina Irwin, Irwin Industries. I am. Tina met his gaze steadily. And I'd like to help with Michael's foundation. If you'll let me. Andy was quiet for a long moment. Amanda had settled into a corner with some wooden blocks Andy had made, building a tower and humming to herself. Why? He finally asked. Why do you want to help? Because I can't bring my son back, Tina said, her voice raw but steady. I can't undo 10 years of stubbornness and pride. I can't apologize to him or tell him he was right or ask for his forgiveness. But I can honor what he built. I can use the skills I taught him, the skills he transformed into something beautiful, to make sure his work continues. He'd like that, Andy said softly. He used to talk about you sometimes, about how brilliant you were at seeing solutions other people missed, about how you could walk into a failing company and see exactly what needed to change. He talked about me? Tina's voice cracked. Always with love, Andy assured her. Even when he was frustrated or hurt, he never stopped loving you. He'd say, my mom taught me to build empires. I just chose to build a different kind. Tina had to press her hand to her mouth again, fighting for control. When she could speak, she said, I want to merge this foundation with Irwin Industries, not to absorb it or change it, but to give it the infrastructure it needs to expand. I'll create a new division, the Michael Irwin Legacy Fund. It'll be independent, with its own board, but it'll have access to all of our resources, our financial analysts, our networks, our efficiency. Andy leaned back, studying her. And you'll fund it? I'll endow it with $50 million to start, Tina said. More if needed. And I'll ensure that every employee at Irwin Industries has the option to volunteer 20 hours a month to foundation work on company time. My son taught people to build better lives. It's time his mother's company did the same. That's... Andy shook his head in disbelief. That's extraordinary. It's insufficient, Tina corrected. But it's a start. There's one more thing, Tina said, her hand moving to the music box. I want you to keep this. Not because I don't want it, but because Michael gave it to you for a reason. He wanted you to have something beautiful, something that reminded you that broken things can be fixed. Mrs. Irwin. But, she continued, I'd like to commission you to make something for me, a piece that honors Michael's memory, something that combines his love of simple beauty with the complexity of what he built. I don't know what form it should take, but I think you'll know. Andy's eyes brightened with artistic interest. A memorial piece? A celebration piece, Tina corrected. Michael didn't live a tragic life. He lived exactly the life he chose. I want something that captures that joy, that certainty. Amanda appeared at Tina's elbow. Daddy could make a tree, she suggested. A giving tree like in the book, with branches that hold different things for different people. Andy and Tina looked at each other, and something passed between them. Recognition of the perfect idea when they heard it. A giving tree, Andy murmured. Each branch a different family he helped. Each leaf a different act of kindness. The trunk carved with his letters, so his words become the foundation. Yes, Tina breathed. Exactly that. Tina spent the rest of Christmas Day in the workshop. She took off her wool coat and her designer scarf. She rolled up the sleeves of her silk blouse, and she sat on the floor with Amanda, painting wooden stars under Andy's patient instruction. Her phone buzzed repeatedly. Board members wondering about her sudden absence, executives needing approvals, investors with questions. She ignored all of it. For the first time in 10 years, Tina Owen was exactly where she needed to be. "You're pretty good at painting," Amanda observed, examining Tina's star critically. "For a beginner." "Thank you," Tina said gravely. "I'm trying to remember how. How to paint. How to fly." Amanda smiled and reached for the wooden bird Tina had brought with her, the one Amanda had given her last night. She carried it in her pocket all morning, a talisman against her own grief. "I think you're starting to remember," Amanda said. As the winter sun set over the city, painting the workshop in shades of gold and amber, Tina helped Amanda hang their painted stars from the ceiling. They spun slowly in the warm air from the space heater, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Andy wound the music box, and Claire de Lune filled the space with its sweet, haunting melody. Tina closed her eyes, and for the first time in a decade, she let herself remember her son not as a disappointment or a loss, but as exactly what he'd been, a man who'd taken the tools she'd given him and built something beautiful. A man who'd known that the real measure of success wasn't in bank accounts, but in lives touched. A man who'd found his own way to matter. "Mrs. Owen?" Andy's voice was gentle. "Are you okay?" Tina opened her eyes and smiled. A real smile, warm and genuine and unguarded. "Call me Tina," she said. "And yes, for the first time in a very long time, I think I am—" Amanda took her hand. "Will you come back tomorrow? Daddy says the best projects take lots of days." Tina looked around the workshop, at the sawdust and the tools and the half-finished projects, at the music box spinning slowly on the workbench, at Andy's kind face and Amanda's hopeful expression. She thought about her empty penthouse, her corner table at the Charles, her empire of steel and silicon that she'd built at the cost of everything that mattered. "Yes," she said, "I'll come back tomorrow. And the day after that, for as long as it takes." Because some projects couldn't be rushed. Some things took patience and time, and the willingness to sand down rough edges one careful stroke at a time. Some things, like learning to value what money couldn't buy, took a lifetime to build. But Tina Irwin had time now. She had a son's legacy to honor, a foundation to build, and a little girl who'd reminded her that broken things could be fixed if you were patient enough to do the work. She had, for the first time in 10 years, a purpose that had nothing to do with profit margins and everything to do with purpose. And as the music box played its gentle song, as Amanda taught her how to make the perfect wooden bird, as Andy sketched designs for the giving tree that would honor Michael's memory, Tina finally understood what her son had been trying to tell her all along. The real empire wasn't the one made of steel. It was the one made of moments like this. Sawdust and starlight, laughter and tears, the patient work of restoring what had been broken. It was learning, at 72 years old, that it was never too late to choose differently. Never too late to remember how to fly. 6 months later, the Charles restaurant had a new tradition. Every Thursday evening, Table 12 hosted an unusual gathering. An elegantly dressed elderly woman, a woodworker in a clean flannel shirt, and a little girl who brought a different wooden toy each week to show the other diners. The music box sat at the center of their table, its gentle melody playing as they planned the next family the Michael Irwin Legacy Fund would help. As they sketched designs for the giving tree that now stood in the lobby of Irwin Industries, its carved branches holding the names of over 500 families. And when people asked Tina Irwin, the steel queen, the tech magnate, the woman who built a $4 billion empire, what had changed, she would smile and pull a small wooden bird from her pocket. "I remember how to fly," she would say simply. And that was all the explanation anyone needed. So here's the real question. Did you subscribe yet? Thousands of people will listen to this story and won't subscribe. Please don't be that person. Kindly support what I do here by subscribing. And then drop in the comment section if you'd like part 2 of Tina, Andy, and Amanda's story. What challenges will they face as their new blended family grows? How will Tina balance her corporate empire with the Michael Irwin Legacy Fund? Let me know if you want to hear more.